In this video, I'm going to briefly review the writing process and the 4 types of essays that we covered over the course of the semester. If you recall way back to week 1, we talked about the writing process and this idea that writing occurs in a series of steps. Hopefully you'll continue to employ this process, not just for your college classes, but for any type of writing that you may need to complete. We're going to briefly review triggering, gathering, shaping, drafting, revising, and editing. Triggering has to do with purpose and motivation, so this fuels good writing. If you're motivated about what you're going to write, you can get excited about it, you're going to produce something better quality and, more meaningful for yourself through this entire process. The next step is gathering. So this is where you begin to gather your ideas to prepare to write. And this involves different pre-writing strategies such as clustering and mapping, free writing, listing your ideas, answering questions, reading to gain more information, and so forth. Shaping is the next step. And this is where you actually will put your ideas into some kind of organized outline where you focus on creating a solid thesis statement, which will be the foundation for the rest of your paper, and then to generate some major and minor supporting details to give shape to your ideas. Drafting is the next step where you use your outline, or maybe if you used a map, whatever you use to organize your ideas. You're going to take that and write the first draft. And in this step, you don't really need to worry about things like grammar and spelling and punctuation. Mainly, you're focusing on just getting your ideas down into an essay format. In the revising stage, this is where you go back and add details, examples. You're looking at organization. And then in the editing step, this is where you actually edit in terms of like proofreading things, so spelling, grammar, punctuation, and that's really the last step, is to make sure everything is clean and polished before you turn your work in. We're going to jump into the different essay genres or types of essays now that we covered over the course of the semester. The first is the personal statement, second is the literary analysis, and then the third, argumentation, and that includes the research paper as well. For the personal statement, often a scholarship application requires a personal statement. We also see personal statements required in different situations, such as applying for graduate school, applying for an internship, and then sometimes for different employment applications. So a personal statement is the chance where you can demonstrate what's unique about yourself through writing. So really you're trying to showcase yourself as an individual and how you stand out in the personal statement. And most personal statements are meant to be short, so there's usually a word count dictating how long your essay can actually be, so you want to make sure you don't exceed word counts. And then you're going to use the basic essay format for your personal statement. For the literary analysis essay, if you recall, it's a relatively brief assignment. So for our class anyway, if you get into graduate school, then it's not so brief. So you want this to be a focused paper. It's formal, using the third person point of view. So you'd use pronouns like he, she, it, they, and not use the first and second voice or point of view, which includes pronouns like I, me, my, mine for the first person, and you and yours for the second person. And this applies to the rest of the type of essays that we're going to discuss in our review. So argumentation and the research paper, because we're trying to focus on supporting our argument or our thesis statement through specific information. In the case of an analysis, through diving deep into looking at specific pieces of a text. and then an argumentation through research, specific points of information that you found through your research and how that actually supports your own opinion about a topic. So for the literary analysis, you want to avoid a plot summary, and you want to instead jump right into the point you're making by using evidence taken directly from the text that you're analyzing. And you want to also include secondary sources, and it's best to use sources that actually write about the text. So for example, with the paper Menagerie, you used an academic journal article that specifically analyzed the paper Menagerie. And then just keep in mind that you're writing a critical analysis rather than an evaluative analysis. So with evaluation, you're subjective and you're actually talking about your opinion about how the story is written. Whereas in this literary analysis, you're taking pieces of a text and analyzing those pieces to support your thesis statement. So it's not about how well written or not something is, but pulling out a specific topic related to the text and then analyzing it to support whatever kind of argument you make about that text. So you want to make sure you're not evaluating the writer or the quality of the story. You want to focus on the story and just one theme. You don't want to get carried away with talking about multiple themes. And you want to avoid proselytizing or trying to convert someone from one religion, one belief, or one opinion, kind of like on a soapbox. And then you want to dig deep, go beyond what's obvious about the text and try to find something more unique and original for your analysis. You also, for the literary analysis, need to be familiar with the elements in fiction. Remember that a title is actually an important piece of a literary text. It's part of the story. And then we talked about setting, so place and time. And remember, settings can change, and settings can also mirror a central character's emotional state of mind. Plot, which is a sequence of events in which the story is told. And then conflict. So every plot has to have at least one conflict. And we can look at conflicts in terms of person against person, person against some kind of external environment, like the weather, society, and then person against themselves. So a character could actually just have an internal conflict within themselves. We looked at characterization, and we talked about things like how a character's name and description can be important in terms of adding to the theme of the story. We talked about different character types, and we really want to focus on dynamic characters. And a dynamic character is a character that undergoes some kind of permanent change over the course of the story. We talked about protagonist and antagonist. So the protagonist is the character that receives the most attention throughout the story. And then the antagonist, and there could be more than one antagonist, is the person or actually thing. So an antagonist does not have to be a person that creates the conflict for the protagonist. The point of view refers to how the story is told. Is it first person? There are different techniques within the first person. Second person, third person. Second person is the rarest type of point of view in literature. Often we see third person as the most common type. And another common type is alternating between first and third person. We talked about theme, which is the most important idea or message conveyed in the story. So everything in the story is going to tie together to contribute to one overall most important idea or message, and that's the theme. And then we talked about figurative language. There are over 200 types of figurative language in the English language. We focused on the most common types, which include irony. There are around 10 types of irony, but we only looked at the three most common, which are verbal, situational, and dramatic. So verbal irony is saying one thing and meaning the opposite. Situational irony is where the expectation of what we as the reader expect to happen doesn't happen. There's another kind of event in the plot that doesn't, it's like a discrepancy from what we think should happen. And dramatic irony is where we in the audience know something to be true, but the characters within, this is, usually within a play, don't really know the true reality. So whatever they think is happening, we know is the opposite. We talked about identifying symbols, or this idea of symbolism, where it could be a name or a person or an object. It goes beyond the literal definition or person and represents something deeper. So symbols can have layers of meaning. But you can't get carried away with thinking everything is symbolic. We need to look for things like repetition, position within the story, and these will help us identify if something really is symbolic. We talked about simile, which is a comparison of two unlike things, specifically using the words like and as. And we also talked about metaphor, which is a comparison of two unlike things, does not use the words like or as, and a metaphor can be short, like maybe one sentence, or extended throughout an entire piece, which is then called an extended metaphor. We also talked about imagery, which is when an author tries to appeal to our five senses by using specific words that will help us maybe see something or think about how something smells or feels or tastes. And then allusion is where just one place, person, or thing is referenced without any further explanation, but it's something of historical, political significance. So it adds a much deeper layer of meaning to what we're reading if we can pick up on the meaning of the allusion. Argumentation. So our third paper, we wrote an argumentative paper, and the entire point of an argumentative paper is to try to convince your audience to believe your opinion about a topic. So we do this by establishing ethos, logos, and pathos. If you recall, ethos is an appeal to character. So we want to use subject matter experts in the field of the topic we're writing about to establish ethos. For logos, we're looking at our supporting points. Excuse me, too much talking. So we want to make sure that the evidence we're using is logical and it's coming from reliable sources. And then for pathos, this is an appeal to emotion. We don't use typically too much of this in academic writing. However, pathos is a very powerful way to convince people to believe your opinion about a topic. So if you are reading something or watching something and you get emotionally stirred up about the topic, most likely there's an appeal to pathos. So certain words are used that are emotionally charged to create this appeal to your emotions, which again is a very effective way to persuade people to believe an opinion. And overall with argumentation, you just want to be careful. You're thinking critically about how you're presenting your argument. Although you are writing about your own opinion about a topic, in doing so, you want to make sure you're supporting your opinion as reliably as possible. So you're relying as much as possible on facts from reliable sources. You acknowledge alternate viewpoints, and you try to keep out your own personal biases during the writing process. And then the last paper is the research paper, and we wrote an argumentative research paper. In general, a research paper is where you expand an essay to present your own interpretation or evaluation of a topic. So you're going to build upon what you know about a topic, and then you're going to research it using subject matter experts. And then you're going to use that information to then add to your topic. So you want to make sure, again, that you're using reliable information and that this is going to be the basis or the support for your own argument related to your research. So building on that, because we did write an argumentative research paper, we want to make sure the thesis is debatable. So we want to go beyond stating what is common knowledge about the topic and try to dig deeper in presenting something that people aren't going to agree upon. That's the debatable part. So again, you're trying to persuade your audience to accept your opinion, which is your argument about the topic you're writing about. And you're going to use researched information to support your opinion. So this is where the research part comes into play. And that concludes this review. I hope this was helpful, and I will continue next week with a review of some of the other topics that we covered in class. Thanks.